Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're going to keep on working on Brenda's Roadster. What we want to do is get the last few things done to it before we take it back off of the frame and then take it up to, or get it sent up to Jeff York Restorations to get the final paint done onto it. I have the ability to paint here, but we don't really have a paint booth. So when it comes to customer cars, we send it out to somebody that's a real painter and does it for a living and has all the right equipment. So the gentleman that owns this has got a good relationship with Jeff. He does a great job. So we're going to finish off the things we need to do to this, which are to put the two floor pans in the front. I've got to make a tunnel to go over the transmission. There's going to have to be a cutout for the master cylinder there that's removable. And then also, because those pedals aren't easy to take off, I've got to make an insert to go around the pedals so that when we bring the body back in, we're not trying to thread a needle through a pinhole to get those pedals in. So that's going to take quite a bit of time to make that up. Also, I need to make a battery box, which potentially I could make later, but I kind of would like to get the battery box made and situated there. The plan is to put it behind the passenger seat. The other thing that I just realized at the end of the last video, I also want to make like a little bracket to go up underneath the dash. It may mount to the firewall, I'm not sure yet, but basically that's going to be where the fuse panel or the fuse box is going to go. I don't want to go drilling holes into a finished painted body if I don't need to, so I'll figure that out beforehand. I've already made the paper or the cardboard patterns in last week's video, but we didn't have a few things to carry on with it. So I'm going to start with these two pieces. I'm going to transfer them over to some 18 gauge and we're going to start cutting and making a floor up. So as I just talked about, I do have the floor templates all cut out of a piece of cardboard. But what I want to do before I start messing with those, I want to build like a little subframe, so to speak, that will support those floors. I kind of like what I've done before. I use actually 1/2-inch square tubing. 3/4 is a little bit big. I was actually supplied some stuff here that seems to be, it's a metric version. It's somewhere around 5/8. So that's actually going to work. I got to clean that up before I use it. So the first piece I wanted to make was the one would actually go over the transmission and basically be the midpoint of where the floor goes and ramps up. So I took a piece of cardboard and I cut out what I thought was good clearance. Actually, I think it goes this way. Yeah, that's it. It goes that way. So I get an equal distance away from the transmission. So I took this piece of cardboard and then I started cutting up some of that 5/8 square tubing, and I've come up with the first cross member here. So this is the first piece right there that I'm going to weld in. I think it goes the other way again. Oh, that was the right way. So I made it as close as I could to the template. This first piece there, I had tried to actually bend it all in one piece, but this stuff didn't bend very well for me. I tried even putting it over in the hydraulic press with that radius to try and bend it. Didn't cooperate very well. So what I ultimately did, I did it in the vise like I did with the other piece. This tubing here actually fits inside. You can see it way over there. There's a piece of 1-inch tubing over there that I actually used to fit over it in the vise, and then just incrementally bent it along the way. What I probably could have done with that too is actually put it in the hydraulic press, and much the same as you would re-arc a leaf spring. You could just incrementally put like little radiuses into it until you got the shape. But I just strong-armed it with a 1-inch outside pipe over the end of it and bent it until I got that right shape, cut it out, and then welded two pieces on the end here. So right now what I'm doing, getting ready to fit that in. I'm going to fit it around the bolts, so I've notched it here. The bolt comes in here. I'll put another piece on this side. We'll show you in a couple of minutes. We'll get her all welded in place. That's the first step for building that little front floor structure. Then I will basically frame around that. So follow along. We're going to get this floor into Brenda's Roadster here. So here's the floor structure all welded in. Like I said, I kind of like to make like a little bit of a subframe for the floor. Probably could make it out of sheet metal once it all screwed together, it holds itself together. But I kind of like to have like a little frame built up. I used 5/8 or 3/4 square tubing. I did have to cut some of the bottom off so that it would sit below the existing subframe, because you want your sheet metal to be flush with it if at all possible. 1/2 inch is a better choice, but this is what we had, so this is what we used. So over there you can see I put the main piece. I did my little hoop over the top. Actually put it so that I could put the bolts through it, the subframe bolts, followed along and basically made like the little squares around here. So what I'm going to do next is, I started doing quite a while ago, is I made the paper patterns. There's the paper pattern. I revised it a little bit. I've made allowances for where the bolts are going to be. And then what I also want to do is I want the sheet metal to come over and then fold up against the inside of the front quarter panel. So you kind of have like a little bit of a seal. And if you wanted to put some seam sealer along the edge of it, you would actually keep the air from flowing inside of the cab. Also, I made a cutout for where the access hole is going to be for the master cylinder. And then what also I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out a section here so that when I put the body in over the brake and the clutch pedals, I'll actually have a removable panel there with some little rubber flaps that go around the brake pedals. So I'll cut this out and make a section to go in there, and then likewise I'll cut this out. So what I'm going to do is either with this piece or the passenger side piece, I'll step you through the bead rolling it and like pre-stretching where the bead rolls are going to be, because we're going to put more than likely like a little X here and a couple reinforcing ribs in the sheet metal for structural reasons, and it looks good too. So, but mainly it stiffens the panel up. So going to cut that out, start bead rolling and cutting the edges out. There'll be a step along here as well. So I'll recess this so that when I put the cover onto it, it actually sits flush inside. So I'll show you all that as I go. There's the first stage of fitting the panel. I cut it out to the right shape. I put the X there to reinforce it. I pre-stretched that X on the English wheel, as you saw. And then what I did, I recessed around the hole for the master cylinder. I recessed around the hole for the brake and the clutch pedal, so that when I put a panel there and I screw it in place, it'll be then flush with the actual floor panel itself. Over here in the center, we cut a hole out for the gear shifter. So the gear shifter is actually going to sit flush on the floor. It will protrude out, and then what will happen, we'll get one of those little rubber boots that'll slip down over the shifter. Same thing applies to the emergency brake handle. Once the floor is all done, buy one of those little rubber, accordion style boots, and then you got a little stainless steel ring around to it. You screw it to the floor. So what I'm going to do now, I might have to just do a tiny little bit of trimming on this, but actually this is the first time it's gone in there. It fits really well for a first attempt on a fit. So I'll go around and then I will use the hole puncher and I will punch holes where I'm going to do the spot welds, and then we'll weld this in place and carry on to the next side. Now I've got the driver's side all welded in place, spot welded in place up against the firewall. I left it so that you could see where all the spot welds are. And then if you notice over against the quarter panel, we brought the floor up and then folded it up so it almost touches. So the intention there would be probably to put some seam sealer along there to basically seal it from the outside. On the passenger side, I didn't show making the panel because essentially it's the same as the driver's side panel with just no cutouts into it. And also I just basically put 2 X's into it to reinforce the floor. It's not necessary, but it kind of goes with the theme of the rest of the floor. It's a combination of straight lines and X's into it that Ford used. So we're going to try and keep that theme along the floor. So right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go dress up the top of all those welds, make it kind of neat and pretty. And then next up will be to make the panel that goes across the top here, which will be welded in. Now, more than likely what I'll do is I will get some masking tape and I will actually fill it in and then make a template and then transfer that to a piece of metal and then bend it to try and fit that space. The piece that goes from the hoop back will be the piece that's removable, which will give access to the emergency brake handle, the shifter, and also the slave cylinder and the clutch adjustment. So that way you can make those adjustments from underneath, or if you want to take the transmission tunnel off, you can do the same thing. So trying to maintain as much accessibility from the top as possible. We don't want these things to break down or need to have adjustments, but the thing is with hot rods, that's the way it is. So we'll make it this way so that for future adjustments and everything else. So anyway, the floor, we're making some progress on the floor. Hoping to have this done before the end of the video. So this is how I'm going to make a pattern for the transmission hump, the section that's going to get welded to the floor. Basically just take masking tape and put it from where I want it to go and just keep crisscrossing it. So what I'll do is I'll peel that out. I'll take a razor and I'll cut along the lines where I marked with a marker here. And then I'll use that for a pattern to transfer it to a piece of metal. And then what I'll do is I'll add an amount for flanges all the way around. So what I'll do is I'll put the flanges on it. I will bend it, and then I'm going to have to tip all of the flanges all the way around up, and then use the shrinker and the stretcher to basically create that arc. I'll show you how I go and how I make it out, but the first step is to make the pattern and then to transfer it to a piece of metal. So I tried to do a time-lapse video there of me tipping the flanges up. I got part of it. Looks as though I had the magnification on a little bit too high, but the purpose of the demonstration was to show how to use those tipping dies, and basically you push the metal in, and as you're rolling it between this, you're basically pushing up on this side. You do it in multiple passes until you bend the flange up. Once those flanges are bent up, then I knew that they actually had to be stretched. So then on the time-lapse video, you could see me feeding this flange in through the stretching dies until I basically had a shape from this wooden template. I think you saw the top of the wooden template, but not all of it. But I used that template until I got that basic shape on the top and the bottom. So the one thing when I was building the tunnel there is I was just going to use the same arch top and bottom. Now you can use a different arch top and bottom if it fans out more at the top, but just make like a wooden pattern of what it is, and then that way when you go to the stretching die or the stretcher, pardon me, you'll have something to work off of versus going back and forth the car 10-15 times. So after I did both the top and the bottom flanges, then I basically come over to the brake. I fit this edge in the brake and then tipped it up. Now, I haven't tweaked this, so basically right now it fits close. So like that. So I'm gonna have to dolly this edge and smooth it out some, likewise with the top. And this flange, I'm gonna have to bend it down a little bit. And then what I'm gonna do then is I will punch a bunch of holes into it, and then I will spot weld that in place. So there's the transmission hump in position, ready to weld. I dressed up all the welds here with the 3M pads there, I forget what they're called, the Cubitron. Yeah, the Cubitron pads. Never was a fan of this kind of a sander, but holy cow, when you've got the right amount of air pressure and use one of these pads, it doesn't kick up as much mess as what the mini grinder does with the flapper disc and everything else. So you still got to wear a mask and everything, but I'm getting really used to it and kind of liking it. Someone else asked me what the clamps that I was using. These are called Cleco locks. It's CLEKO-LOC. I did a quick search on Amazon. I don't see these come up. These were given to me by someone in a junkyard. They were covered in plastic. I cleaned up about a dozen of these and I've been using them ever since. And it's kind of my go-to clamp for fastening stuff in. It really, I mean, these ones here are 5/32. I've got a little bit bigger ones over there too. But as you can see, when you put them in, you can apply quite a bit of pressure to these to basically pull everything together. I'm actually cheating a little bit using these woodworking F-clamps, but hey, they work. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go around, I'm gonna weld all that in place. We'll dress up the welds, and then we're gonna get on to making that panel next. For the transmission cutout, it's I've done this before. It's relatively straightforward to do. We're not gonna be doing any stretching or like English wheel. Well, we will be doing some English wheel stuff, but we're not going to be like stretching the metal to get the shape. What it basically has to do is we have to get a radius or a radius on the metal in the front and a lot less of the one on the back. So what I did, I took a cloth tape measure and I measured the radius or the distance across here and then across the back. And I added on 3/4 of an inch for a flange all the way around. Unfortunately, my battery ran out, so I didn't have much time to tape this, so had to get it done, so I'm kind of describing it after the fact. However, we'll do our best here to show you what I did. The end product is sitting right here. So the first thing I did was take the sheet metal and actually put it in the English wheel, but not with the regular wheels. What you want to use is this rubber wheel on top. And what the rubber wheel on top does, if you watch some of my previous videos, is that the bottom wheel here with this radius pushes into the rubber. And what it does is that as you move it along, in and out, it imparts a small radius in the metal without stretching it. So normally if you're using an English wheel, when it's metal to metal and you put a high crown on here, you're actually going to locally stretch the metal out. But we didn't want that. We wanted to shape it in this particular case. Now, if you don't have this, you can grab a bottle or something, like if you've got an acetylene bottle or an oxygen bottle or something round like that, you can take it and just put it down between your knees and then just press the metal across that round shape until you get it. It's essentially the same thing. Just with this, you can incrementally add a little bit of radius as you go without stretching the metal. And then for the flanges over here, basically just went over to the metal brake and just stuck them in the metal brake. Now what happens is when I put this shape here, it also comes out here, even though I only go a short distance in the English wheel. So what you've got to do is put that end in, bend it up to flatten it, and then bend it back. And then ultimately I have to come over here on the shrinker and then shrink some of that flange in to get it as flat. Let's see if we can, there we go. It's not perfectly flat, but it's darn near. So that flange is flat. And then with the cutouts, basically measure, 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 cut your hole small, and then creep up on the sides until you've got clearance for the emergency brake and the shifter. I have since put this in. Like I said, unfortunately the battery died on my camera, on my phone, and I had to keep on working. So we've got a little bit of a charge into it now. And that is the end product. So I've got all the holes drilled. I'm going to put the screws into it. The next up, I'm going to make this little cover piece here and the cover piece for the pedals. Only two more things left to do on the floor. Needed to make two little covers. This cover here is for the master cylinder and for the brake master cylinder and the clutch master cylinder. So essentially, where I'd relieved the floor before, made a cutout, stretched this area here on English wheel so that when I bead rolled it, it wouldn't crown out. So essentially, if you take a blank like this, and if you were just to bead roll it in here, you'd probably distort the panel. But what you do, like I've probably repeated it a couple times now, but if you pre-stretch this on the English wheel, you'll make the blank panel be crowned, but then after you put the beads into it, it flattens right out. So that's done. We've just got some self-tapping screws holding it in place. And then up here, we made the cover for the brake pedal and the clutch pedal. When this is assembled finally, more than likely we'll get some little rubber and we'll actually glue or screw some rubber around the pedals so that you've got a seal to the outside. And that was the intent here with these two. We wanted to bring the floor up against the inside quarter panel to potentially then seal it off so that you don't have airflow coming in from the outside or rain. I know in my Model A, I didn't seal it off very well. Got in a rainstorm and got my legs soaked when the water came out through the pedal holes. But we'll make sure that that doesn't happen with this one. Have both of these covers in place, the floor in place. There's one or two last things we have to do before we take the body back off the frame. Hopefully we'll get those done before the end of this episode. One other thing we noticed was that when we close the trunk lid, I could do this with one hand. I'll try. There's too much contact over here. Got a nice gap here, but when we come over to here, so I'm going to have to make an adjustment on this. More than likely, we'll grind this down, re-weld it up, and then we'll get a good gap here. There's a nice gap all the way around, but I don't want to let that go out to paint because it's just going to cause problems later. So follow along. We're wrapping up the 32 Ford Roadster body before we send it out to paint. So got the gap all fixed up here. Essentially all I did was I took a piece of masking tape, drew a straight line across here with the lid down, and made a mark where I wanted to make the gap, and then grounded just ever so slightly below that line, and then came around and then slowly welded this tip up here. I thought about getting the TIG welder out, but the TIG welder doesn't like contaminants, so I MIG welded it along. If everything would have been super clean, this could have been a real candidate to do a TIG weld, because you just doing a fusion weld here along this edge would be the ideal scenario. But nevertheless, welded it up. I used a little grinder and ground it down. But then don't be afraid to go grab a file, because if you really want to get it flat and straight, I mean, that's the best way to go. And then, you know, the welds, well, actually I did grind it flat with a file. Old school stuff works really well. Don't be afraid to grab the file to straighten stuff out. So right now, I've got a pretty decent gap here, all the way along. It's thin and narrow, but it's thin and narrow across the entire thing now. There's no contact between the deck lid and the tail pan here. I'll just take that little piece of masking tape off. So we're good to go on that one. And then the last thing, like I mentioned, I wanted to do was up underneath the dash here, I made a little panel to put the fuse panel on. So it's bolted to two of the bolts that attach the cowl to the quarter panels here. And then I just took a little arm and made a spot weld and welded it to the frame. So it's on there pretty steady, actually better than on my other two cars. So we're good there. So that kind of wraps up as far as we can go this week, it being the week of Christmas. We've got the floor all done. We've got all the panels in place, removable panels, and I'm at the stage now where I'm ready to take the body back off the frame, but we've run out of time. So like I said, Christmas for us is 2 days away. I think you're going to be seeing this a day after Christmas on Boxing Night, if I'm not mistaken. So anyways, just want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, happy holidays, or happy whatever you're celebrating this time of year. Go spend some time with your family, and all the best from the camera lady and I. So anyway, please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Send me your comments, and I will see you next week.